Salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on this planet. This is JLL responding to the Q&A. I have a total on 3 channels, including my associate, Ginny Thwaite. I have a total of 96 entries. Not all of them are questions. So it will take a couple of episodes to respond. So this is part 1 of responses to be found on the JLL channel. So here goes. It's 4 in the morning here, winter, early fall morning in the mountains of a fairyland lost between Portugal and France. And I'm reading from the earliest entries up to the latest. Mark Barker, glad to see you still around, Mark. It's been a long time. What do I think about the Bhagavad Gita? I think it's a corrupt document that Vedic patriarchs, overlords, interpolated into the national saga of the Indian people, the Mahabharata. So that is a story of warriors and of probably actual events that happened. It's a story of a war between 2 clans. Now, when you look at the Bhagavad Gita, it appears it's presented as if it is a conversation that happens on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, when Krishna, who is the charioteer for Arjuna, stops the battle in order to give a discourse on peace, but not exactly. Krishna argues that it's okay, he's giving Arjuna his green light to go ahead with the battle, and if you kill your friends and relatives and if they kill you, then it doesn't really matter because it's all an illusion and that which is eternal in you cannot be killed. Well, I don't go along with that philosophy at all, and I think, as I said, that the Bhagavad Gita is a pious, pacifist commentary, even though it does allow Arjuna and the others to continue their battle. But do they really need permission from a higher authority represented in Krishna in order to do that? Now, there are some sublime passages in the Bhagavad Gita, and for many years I read it devotedly. But in recent years, I've taken a more critical and harsh view. It begins with the word dharmata, I think, to a variation of dharma, which Stephen Mitchell and others translate as righteousness. Well, right there, it goes off track. The point of the battle at Kurukshetra is not to do the righteous thing, but to do the right thing. So I completely reject the Bhagavad Gita, and I do not subscribe to the Vedic philosophy of transcendentalism that you find stated in that document. Nevertheless, I do continue to entertain the sublime figure of Krishna as a Hindu erotic deity, and I enjoy the mythology of Krishna. I date the beginning of Kali Yuga from the death of Krishna in 3102 BC, but I reject, as I say, the Vedic sermon on transcendental morality. On the other hand, I do agree that the anthropos is deathless, and also I agree that each and every one of you who may someday be engaged in a life or death struggle with your enemies or even with your neighbors, I do agree that you also are deathless in the sense that your ancestry and the ancestral line from which you come is deathless. It is a deathless vine rooted in the anthropos. Next, from Maggie Lee, she's asking me, what is the source of my statement that one of the vaccines has been constructed and derived from an aborted fetus? It's written on the material on the package of the mRNA vaccine from Moderna. Go find it. Or perhaps someone can give her direction to the source of that information. The source of it is the pharmaceutical company itself. Gnostic Avenger is asking about if I would do a presentation Director's Cut 2.0. I assume that would refer to the ongoing event of correction and how it's playing out. Really don't know. If it came to me one day, I would. It's also asking about the issue of full disclosure, which means that government officials, people from the three-letter agencies would come out and tell the public that we have made contact with an alien civilization. Well, don't hold your breath for that one. Jacques Vallée said cogently that the entire ET-UFO phenomenon is nothing but, quote, a spiritual control system, end quote. In other words, it's a psyop. It's just another tiresome psychological warfare tactic to keep people confused and hopeful of something, hopeful of some kind of intervention from outside. As far as Bluebeam is concerned, that would be a narcotic simulation of an extraterrestrial appearance or possibly an extraterrestrial attack. I think that the public is so weary of IT simulations that it would blow over in a matter of days, and many people wouldn't believe it, many people would expose it for what it is, and the rest of them just wouldn't care. Would they, in any case, stage a false flag computer simulation ET invasion? They'll do anything that they can do. Basically, if they can do it, the chances are they might do it. It's plausible. And would they use that as a pretext to establish martial law across the planet? Maybe. I don't know. But I'm not holding my breath, and I don't really care. Remus Herman asks if the mothership is still on its way to the center of the galaxy. Well, I never said that that would be the case. Of course, you might have inferred that. When I talk about correction, I talk about the realignment of the Aeon Sophia, which is the living planet, the mothership, to the galactic center. And in the Gaian navigation experiment, I plotted in detail how that alignment is underway. So, no, I don't picture the Earth with its crew and passengers, the mothership, returning literally to the galactic center. About the organic light, if you want to know how to interact with it and many other things, then join Nemata. That's the way to find out. You can join as a visitor at no cost. And one of the units in Planetary Tantra, which is open to all visitors, is the video talk that I gave, where I talk quite extensively about the organic light, what it is, how it behaves, and what happens when you interact with it. Jane Slater is asking about how long will it be until the next Yuga. We're in the Kali Yuga. It's about 5,000 and something years long, and it ends in 2216. which is the end of one cosmic day of 25,920 years. A new cycle of yugas would begin after 2216. Paul Gaffner is asking about chapter 21 of Not in His Image. That's entitled Unmasking Evil. Have I changed it? No. I stand by my view. First, that Abrahamic salvationist religion based on the secret cult of the Zaddikim is both the evidence and instrument of an alien mind virus. So there is one true virus on this planet, the archonic virus. I stand by that argument, and I stand by my argument as well that the Zaddikim of Qumran and other places such as Damascus were members of an ET UFO cult. And I present plenty of evidence to support that claim. John Roberts asks why I got away from decoding Mandela effects. Well, as I explained in the exposition on the Mandela effect on my other channel, Mandela effects were cues and clues made available to the world, made available to those who could detect them, due to the Aeonic Mother hacking into the internet so she can use that archonic medium to signal to her witnesses on the conditions that the witnesses have the intel to know that she is signaling them and to know that she has their attention and know that she knows that we have her attention. Those are the basic conditions. And as I explained in October of 2017, the Mandela effect faded out at that time. And so there were no more legitimate Mandela effects to decode from that moment on. He also asks, is that creature still walking around? I'm not sure who you're referring to there, my friend, but perhaps you're referring to the identified target of the Charlotte working, which immediately came after Mandela effect decoded. Well, I don't really know. Apparently, yes. But in the world that we live in today, how can you know? How can you know that the man is presumed to be the president of the United States who appears on public media is actually that man? How do you know it's not a deep fake? How do you know it's not a double? Charlotte working had a result which came as a total surprise. One of the conditions that I accepted in undertaking the Charlotte working, which, as far as I know, is the first and only completely open and transparent attempt to perform ritual magic in public, one of the difficulties I faced was confirmation of whether the target would go down or not. Regardless of that, there was an extraordinary result of that ritual, and you can learn about that on Nematta. Obviously, I'm not going to spend time answering your valuable questions by talking at length about things that I've already covered. Perceiving acting brings up the topic of toxoplasmosis, which is considered to be a sort of brain parasite. Well, the Mandela Effect Decoded series began with a number of elaborate talks on toxoplasmosis and how I view it, citing the Robert Zapolsky, is that his name? And other, other experts, and giving my particular spin. There's no specific question in this entry. Michigander says, friendship in the spring. Well, it's not a question, of course. but it strikes a lovely note, doesn't it? Next, Wilfred Bellow presents me with a string of 10 questions. So to be fair, I'll answer the first and the last. First question is, what can objectively be stated about the reliability of the intel gained as a result of running a methylphrenic fugue by following the directive RIGPA versus the reliability of intel received as a result of having an up-close and personal encounter with the organic light? How to distinguish fantastic fabulations and creations with grounded or true imaginings where both seem to fit within the narrative of her story. All right. This is a good question because I'm sure everyone wonders about the reliability of what I say. So the question breaks down into two parts: the reliability about what you learn from the organic light and the reliability about a methylphrenic fugue. So the reliability of what you gain from the organic light, in my opinion, always rests on two criteria. First criteria is your intention. What is the intention you have to encounter the light, including the question you bring to it? And second, the takeaway. What is the takeaway? So I distinguish my accounts, my reports, if you want to call them that, of what I have learned from encountering the organic light from the accounts and claims of others who say they don't need to use that method and they can access the Divine Mother in their own way. I always apply the same criteria to them as I do to myself. Well, what is the basis of your intention to encounter the Aeonic Mother? And what's the takeaway? What are you getting out of it? What can you state? In addition to that formula, I have claimed that the proof of authenticity is in the novelty and originality of the intel, and also the specific and provable factual content of the intel. For instance, I received the word in my mind, the word came to my mind on Infinity Ridge in 2004 when I asked a question about the Aztecs' adrenochrome. And at that moment, I had not heard the word adrenochrome before, and it's not the first time that this has happened. So the takeaway, the result of research with the organic light, if you choose to call it that, is always something that can be verified independent of that encounter. As far as methylphrenic fugues go, a methylphrenic fugue is simply a flash action in your synapses. And depending on the condition of your second attention, which is your imagination, and your first attention, depending on the condition of those tools of your intelligence, you handle the flash well, or you handle it badly or poorly. So certainly, I have cited things, I have cited insights, I have presented themes, tropes, whole streams of information based on methylphrenic fugues. That is not the same source as going directly to the organic light, obviously, but the same criteria apply. What is the basis of the fugue? What is it grounded in? And secondly, what is the takeaway? Is it original? Does it produce originality? Moreover, I think it would be appropriate for me to add that I'm not infallible, and I don't stand 100% by things that I've said coming out of a methylphrenic fugue. I make errors, I slur the intel, I sometimes make presumptions which I strictly try to refrain from doing, I sometimes presume and infer in ways that are not correct. So I rely on those who work with me to correct me if I don't correct myself. Finally, don't forget the alchemical rule. You work with the true and not the fantastic imagination. And the difference is that the true imagination is always guided and framed by the Sophianic narrative. Finally, you ask about light in the galactic arms being an unknown. I assume you're referring to the FGS. And I said that when Sophia found herself in the galactic limbs, she confronted the particular kind of light in that region, which is called the kinema, which was different from the light at the galactic core, which is called the pleroma. Well, certainly she knew what it was before she found herself there, but she did not know the experience and how it would affect her. For example, you certainly know what surf is. You know what a 10-foot curl is? Probably, but have you ever been in a 10-foot curl? You know what undertow is? But have you ever been caught in undertow? It's simple. Perceiving acting again. What do I think about DJT, Trump? Well, I think that he's a puppet and a traitor, and he's completely run by his handlers. So look at who his handlers are. That's not difficult to see. I think that the whole Trump administration was a setup to divide the country and to demonize those people that I would call the white partisans. Also, on the basis of extensive studies, including a book, for instance, The Controversy of Zion by Douglas Reed, I have seen the factual information and evidence to support the claim that all American presidents have been selected going back 100 years or so. I even know who selected them. And the same people that selected, say, Roosevelt, back then, well, the people who selected and controlled Trump today are in the lineage of the same people who selected and controlled Roosevelt and countless numbers of other leaders, so-called leaders, government officials, and so forth. The whole system is entirely corrupt, and DJT is no exception. Susie Pie 11 asks if I can explain germs and Louis Pasteur. Well, go to the internet and look for Virus Mania by Carolina Markolin, Markolin, and there you will have the full answer to your question. Megan Silenite asks what was the outcome of the CW, the Charlotte Working. Well, again, it was a complex experiment in certain ways. It certainly was a dazzling adventure for the two human animals who undertook it. And we have, in fact, a chronicle day by day and hour by hour of how the Charlotte Working was performed in January 2018 and subsequent events. Now, as I said earlier, one of the dilemmas with the Charlotte Working is that there is no way, even now, to absolutely confirm that the target went down. It's possible, for instance, that the target went down. But can you imagine what would happen in the world if it came to be known that a certain magic ritual, a lethal strike, in some way played a role in the demise of that person? You see, there are tricks involved. It's very tricky. This has never been done before. You wouldn't believe the amount of careful reflection and what shall I say, organization of details that it took to perform the Charlotte working. But at the end of the day, although the stated outcome can't be confirmed or denied, well, there was another outcome, totally unanticipated and completely supernatural. And if you want to learn about that, then you can learn all about it on Nematta. A question from Gabby Bliss with a kindly invitation to Australia. Thank you very much. How can we take down the evil human proxies? Well, do you know about the Calico War Party? There's a website and there's a manifesto. Go take a look at it. It's a blueprint for the warrior class. My solution, as I said in my talk with Red Ice on Parzival, don't call it a solution, call it a challenge. I said what the world needs to overcome evil is a warrior class. So my answer is, are you interested in joining the warrior class? If you are, go look at the Calico War Party and read the manifesto. Laura Leah asked me about quantum theory hypnotherapy. Well, first of all, I totally reject quantum theory, string theory, quantum mechanics, Einsteinian relativity, special and general relativity. I reject the vast body of modern science coming forward after Maxwell and Faraday as fraud science, coming from quackademics, as some people call them. If someone tells you they're a mathematical physicist, you know they're a fraud. If someone tells you they're a theoretical physicist, you know they're a fraud. If someone says that they're going to teach you how the universe works through quantum theory, they're a fool and a fraud. There is nothing in it whatsoever. Now, there are all kinds of techniques of autosuggestion and hypnotherapy that someone can try. And who am I to say that an individual in a particular case working with another individual who administrates the technique isn't going to experience something that might benefit them? Of course, human animals are extremely suggestible, but I take a hard stance. I don't approve of these things. I don't endorse them. I think they're dangerous and a waste of time. And since there is another method, which is autogenics or interactive magic with Gaia, that is better, then why bother with all of the hundreds of therapies that are for sale? Autogenics, planetary tantra, is not for sale, but it does require commitment and discipline to learn how to use it. For instance, to learn how to use the Shakti Cluster app. Next comes Uncle Salty. Well, from one pirate to another, always pleased to hear from you. Do I think it's important regarding the awakening of A11 that we awaken the masses out of the they live scenario? It's funny, I was just thinking about that when I woke up this morning. Actually, I question the idea of awakening the masses. What the masses will ultimately do doesn't depend on them. They do not have autonomy by the very definition or the very status of belonging to the masses. So I was thinking this morning, or my Rigpa brought up a 3-letter acronym, CSB, Civil Sanity brigade. And I thought, what does that mean? So I proceeded to let my Rigpa elaborate it for me. And what I came up with is the notion that change in the masses could be, let's say, inspired and directed by small brigades, or what I call civil groups, civil sanity brigades. So I see civil action, people on the ground, ordinary people who've been informed about the nature of this crime, acting together in small groups in their communities, in direct contact with people around them. I don't see any chance that the masses will be awakened, certainly not through the mainstream media, or not even through the alternative media. Awakened in what sense? Awakened to the facts? Then you mean informed. Well, certainly the people on the alternative media are doing a lot, and I believe a lot of progress is being made to inform the masses. But ultimately, I don't see that as the game changer. I see individual acts of autonomy and power and resistance, and acts of groups, civil brigades. And I have some ideas about how these brigades would operate. What tools would they use? But I don't know if I will talk about that, because I don't like to talk about things that I myself am not actually doing. And I don't have any opportunity in the circumstances of my life to carry out or participate in that sort of program. Pablo Oleros asks, what is samadhi in a Gnostic perspective? Well, it's quite specifically the ecstatic trance of gnosis. That is samadhi. I've pointed out somewhere along the way, goddess knows where, that the Vedic yogis distinguish two kinds of samadhi. Nirbija, meaning without seed, and sabija, meaning with seed. So in sabija samadhi, you have content, rich and detailed content. So encountering the organic light is an experience of sabija samadhi. The characteristics of genuine samadhi are the melting, but not disappearance, of the ego self. Certainly, you remember that you exist, you don't lose your mind, you don't forget who you are, but the self-reflective properties of single self-identity are reduced to the minimum, and you are more or less an anonymous witness. That's one criteria. You feel a surge of bliss at the cellular level. You feel extreme mental clarity, and you feel total immersion in the sensuous spectrum of the material world in the body of the mother. Those are the particularly Gnostic standards for the experience of samadhi. I've never attained samadhi by meditation, by the way. I had spontaneous experiences of samadhi from my teens, and then, now, through the Gnostic method of instruction by the light, I've learned how to enter samadhi deliberately and repeatedly. By the way, just in case you're curious, when I'm in that state, I look just the way I do now. I'm not sitting there in a full lotus with my eyes rolled up and my anus puckered. And when I'm in that state, I'm completely functional and sober. And some people even say that I can be extremely funny, and also that I tend to speak in a certain manner which stuns people. But, you know, do you know, the fact that I could be sober and lucid and say breathtakingly brilliant things in a state of samadhi is not my privilege alone. Anyone who masters the technique can do the same. Unique 13 asks, what about Maitreya, presumably Maitreya, and would I do a talk on the Andromedan doubles? I have to be in a really, really rare mood to talk about the Andromedan doubles. And I can't actually go there intentionally. I can do it when the mood comes over me. It really is a particular type of altered state. And unless I'm in that altered state, I prefer not to talk about Andromedan doubles. But there's an enormous instruction about Andromedan doubles on nimitta in the material titled Translations from the Andromedan. As far as Maitreya is concerned, there is a unit on nimitta about the Maitreya process, and it says everything that you need to know. So go and look at that. The Maitreya, the benevolent friend, is not to be confused with the tulpa of the Aeon Sophia, which is a separate item. It's a highly sophisticated concept in planetary tantra. But I spoke about that also at length in the Gaian navigation experiment, particularly in one talk called The Revelation of Her Method. Hybrid Therapa asks about the pleroma and what of the stars, and generally who is the originator and the symbiont and so forth. So the fallen goddess scenario is an astronomical myth. It's not something that happens everywhere in the cosmos. It's a story of what happened in this galaxy. So yes, the pleroma is the hub or core of the galaxy. Therein live the great torrential serpentine aeons or generators. The originator is beyond all of the aeons. As episode 1 explains, the originator releases a singularity. The aeons receive the singularity and they develop it and design it into various life forms. There are no stars as such in the galactic center. There are stars in the galactic arms. Are they alive? What isn't alive? Everything is alive. The entire universe is alive, but the forms of superlife are to a certain degree beyond the range of perception of the human animal. You know, human animals and all other animals like trout or ducks or, let's say, ladybugs have what is called an Umwelt, U-M-W-E-L-T. And this is a concept that comes from the field of ethology, of which I have often spoken. So the man who discovered this, can never pronounce his name, Baron von Uexküll, was a natural scientist of the 20th century, and he experimented, I believe, with trout. So he put trout in this tank, and there was a window in the tank, and then he arranged a device to flash a card in the window off and on. And he noticed that the trout only came to the window when he flashed the card off and on, opening and closing the window, at a certain rate. So you can go directly from that to motion pictures. What is the rate of film in a classical motion picture camera? Is it 36 frames a second? So that's an Umwelt. It means that when still photos on the film run across the lens at the rate of 36 frames in a second, the human animal perceives motion. So what's happening with the superlife of the stars and even the superlife of the mountains and the sea and the depths of the ocean, even the superlife present around us, what's happening with that can only be known according to the Umwelt of the human animal. But the Umwelt of the human animal is not absolutely fixed. So it can be expanded to perceive infrasensory and supernatural content. The stars are alive. You can watch the stars at night over many years and you can learn to communicate with them. Do you know that in ancient times and coming forward well into the Renaissance, it was common all over Europe for people who wrote about the stars to call them animales. So they considered the stars to be great animals, that is to say, living sentient beings. But all of this is theoretical unless you undertake the practice by which you train your Rigpa so that you can expand your Umwelt and directly witness this phenomena. Second question from the same post: where do fragmented souls go? Well, this question can't be answered on the basis of surviving Gnostic material, except possibly with reference to two books in Coptic which stand outside the Nag Hammadi library. And those are called the Books of Jew, unfortunately, J-E-U. I don't know what it means. I think it was a designation of some kind of soul substance, I'm guessing. It certainly doesn't allude to Juno-Hu or to the Jews. Those two documents are really difficult to understand, but presumably what they say is that there is something called the treasury of the light, which would appear to be actually the sun. And they describe it as a huge hive of a honeycomb structure inside that collects the souls of the dead. So I don't like to speculate about these things, and I myself am not particularly interested in what happens after death. And I always go by what the Gnostics said in the Gospel of Philip, I believe. They said, if you don't experience while you're alive what happens after death, then when you die, you won't experience anything. I stick by that one. Vaguely speaking, and I'm stepping out into speculative territory here, which you know I don't like to do, but vaguely speaking, I would say that there is some kind of cosmic recycling process. Certainly I know, and I can verify from various angles, that people don't reincarnate. Your single self-identity, as you know yourself now, does not survive, but your memories do, and your passions survive. So what happens to the lived memories and the unlived passions of your life, or even the lived passions, which still have more to be lived in them? Well, they are forces, animating forces in the cosmos, and in some manner, which I don't presume to understand, they are recycled. That accounts for, to some degree, for the fact that when an individual is born, they have particular passions that drive their life. To be an artist, to be a writer, an explorer, whatever. And in my view, those passions have been inherited from others who lived before who had the same passions. So nothing ever dies, it just gets recycled. I don't like to use the word reincarnation. I prefer the technical term from the mysteries, which is palingenesis. And another word, metempsychosis. To me, those are the technical mystery terms that refer to this mysterious recycling of what you call soul fragments. Alison Aussie asks about short, fat, wrinkly blue beings who appear to children at night. Are they archons? No. Are they similar to the bug-eyed grays of Whitley Strieber? I don't think so. Children see a lot of things. Children have very active imaginations because when they're born, the default setting of their second attention, which operates through imagination, controlled imagination, and fantasy, is off the charts. So they fantasize a lot and they see all kinds of things, but how would you verify if there are actual autonomous entities at play in such a situation? I think it would be very difficult. As for the embryonic type of bug-eyed, spindly-limbed gray ET, I've spoken at length about the origin and the behavior of those entities. Coming around to the conclusion, it's a question from Qin Shi Wang. Is there a dual function of Sophia Gaia and her correction and the archons? While COVID and mask wearing may be a problem for people, it may be the way Sophia Gaia chose as an archon, or more appropriately, aeon, to purge the world of evil as a means to that end. Well, this is a remarkable question, my friend. And in my small circle, very small, I do discuss this now and then. In fact, just the other night, I was saying, look, there is a selection process going on. A10 is dying out, and the Aeon Sophia is mutating a new strain of the Anthropos within this experiment currently, and that's what we call A11. So could it be to her purposes and to her advantage that there is a call due to many tads in the world stupidly following the measures to control the pandemic, ruining their health, poisoning themselves? Could she be allowing that to happen because it goes along with her intention as an aeon? She never acts as an archon. It goes along with her intention to reduce the population. Does she have an intention to reduce the population? Yeah, I would say so. She has powers of extinction, which she has exercised numerous times since the appearance of the human species on this planet at the beginning of the Cambrian explosion. So yeah, it's possible. We've never been in this situation before. I say we, the entirety of races on the planet have never been in this situation before, and there are a lot of unknowns. But without speculating too much, I would say that that's a possibility worth considering. Yes, it's plausible. Finally, to keep this recording under an hour, I'll respond to LaddieBoy123 with a question about compassion and forgiveness. Well, this is quite pertinent. In one of the chapters in Not in His Image, that I reworked slightly, I introduced the meme of the beauty to come. So there's a subheading, the beauty to come. I think it's in chapter 22, which is called Sophia's Correction. It used to be called Divine Imagination. And I pointed out that in the beauty to come, there is no punishment. But I added, there is no forgiveness either. So that's something to reflect on. Punishment, you know, is of course the theme and aim and supreme purpose of the Abrahamic Father God. You hear of nothing but punishment in the legends of the ancient Hebrews. They were punished by their own God. Their enemies were punished. They punished their enemies punished them, and on and on and on it goes, and it drags on endlessly. And what is happening today? Well, the authorities are punishing the populations of the races of the world for breathing, for being alive, for wanting to make friends, for wanting to dance and sing, for wanting to enjoy life, for wanting to have the dignity and reward of a livelihood, for wanting to support other people, wanting to give children a future. No matter what you say about the way this crime against humanity is working out, it's clear as day to me that it is punitive. And at the top of the pyramid, of course, it is the transhumanists and the technocrats who want to punish the rest of the world for not going along with their program. It's as simple as that. You don't have to look any deeper. Of course, the deep taproot of this insane program of transhumanism can be found in not in his image. So, if there's no punishment and no forgiveness, what do you do in cases of harm and deceit? And who's going to be responsible in the beauty to come to detect and act upon those who commit harm and deceit? This is a big question. This is a question in development, and the answer is also in development. As I said earlier on, the warrior class, what the world needs is a warrior class. Now that brings me to the subject of compassion. Now you notice that in a formula of the Symbian, you don't find the word compassion. You find the words love and empathy and self-love. Your self-love is to your sense of humanity as your sense of humanity is to your empathy for other animals. I don't speak about love for other animals not because I deny it. I have had through my life animals that I love, but that's a special case, you see. I may love my cat, but I don't necessarily love the cows in the field, although I have empathy for the cows. But I recognize realistically that the cows are subsistence animals, and they are not pets or domestic animals. So I think you'd agree that most people love their pets. It's an individual case. It's a one-on-one case between the human and the dog, the human and the cat, the human and the duck, whatever. But still, love between a human animal and a duck or a goose, I love geese, love to see them fly, is not the same as the love of one human animal to another. So if you can make these simple distinctions and go and reflect on how you feel about them and the values you attach to them, you can ease your way into the symbiont formula. But compassion is not contained in the symbiont formula, is it? So I'll close this talk on a very personal note and tell you my view of compassion. I regard compassion as currency, really valuable currency, like some rare metal, platinum, or like turquoise, the turquoise trail, which runs through Santa Fe, by the way. I used to ride the turquoise trail, I used to drive it from Santa Fe to Albuquerque. What a trip. Turquoise and coral are traded in indigenous societies. They're currency, okay? Compassion is a currency like turquoise. And of course, obsidian, the green obsidian of Teotihuacan, for instance. Good thing about obsidian is you can use it for currency, and it can also cut somebody's throat with it. It's very handy to have some around. Anyway, compassion is a currency, and I spend it with extreme care. I do not extend compassion to everybody in the world. In fact, almost nobody. I only have compassion for warriors in the band of Kali or in the other bands of the Calico War Party. I do not have compassion for ordinary people. I do not have compassion for humanity at large. The currency is simply too valuable to expend except on those who are really worthy of it. That's compassion to me. Enough said, and I'll pick up the remaining questions in the second recording.